Mouthwashing, the most recent hit indie horror game to grace its presence on Steam and Twitter, but we aren't here to discuss how great of a game Mouthwashing is. Even though it is, go play it. We are here today to analyze the interpersonal relationships and how they mimic each other within the game. Now, if you don't know the story of Mouthwashing and you don't want to play it, I highly recommend watching Rinsely's video on the chronological order of the game, so that you can get a basic comprehension of the game and its story. The two main relationships we are analyzing are going to be Jimmy and Curly's relationships, as well as Daisuke's and Swansea's relationships, and how they relate to Anya's belief of your worst moment doesn't define you. It's important that we analyze both Jimmy and Curly for what kind of people they are, how similar they are, and where their differences lie. Curly is currently the captain of the ship. He calls all the shots and generally takes up the role of leadership over his crewmates. He's at the top of his so-called ladder and he has his life together, but feels that maybe his life has stagnated. He's reached the top rung of his position and doesn't really find it entirely fulfilling. Curly is a hard worker and he's also lucky to be in his position. Jimmy is the co-pilot of the ship. We hear from dialogue exchange between Curly and him that he wasn't doing too well on Earth and that Curly got him this job. We know Jim likes his job because of the control he feels. We can also assume that Jimmy is jealous of Curly and wants what Curly has. We see it through extremely clear dialogue. This dialogue occurs when we are in the perspective of Curly giving the mental health evaluation to Jimmy, as soon as they go off the books. Lines like, "All I ever hear is how great of a captain you are, it's kind of annoying," are examples. After Curly states that he's looking for something different in life, Jim gets cynical about how he still has to climb the ladder. Lines like, "Still a long way down from the top no matter how you look at it, while I'm still climbing and climbing," support these thoughts. Through these lines, the game establishes the parallels between the two. Jim wants to be everything that Curly is, while Curly wants to change what he is. I believe this is what kickstarts Jim's spiral. The person he wants to be doesn't even want to be himself. That'd mess anybody up. The next thing we should take a look at is the negative and positive perspectives that occur within the relationship. Curly, donning the positive side, states things like, "You must take the bad for the good to be good," while Jim is the negative side, shown in scenes like the cake eating scene and even just how he assumes the worst out of people, which you see more of towards the end of the game. Curly has leader qualities, even with his mistakes. While he might fail Anya, he still shows drive to protect his crew. He even attempted to steal the ship last minute, and though futile, it was still a sacrifice. Jim lacks these qualities. He thinks he's a leader after the crash, however, through his actions, it is shown otherwise. Dialogue with Anya after Jim breaks the medicine cabinets highlights this the most. Jim gets angry at Anya because he has to do everything, even though everything is very little. Throughout the time after the crash, Jimmy attempts to half-heartedly take care of his responsibilities as the captain. He yells at Anya whenever she asks him to give Curly his medicine. He hates seeing what is left of Curly because it reminds him of how bad the situation has become and how it all stems from his insecurities. Everything that has happened to the Pony Express crew is a byproduct of Jimmy's selfishness. He is the sole responsible for all the problems. Now, we do need to discuss some of the faults that Curly has made. Some of the decisions made by Curly are morally gray in the service of his crew, like keeping the news about Pony Express going under, which did make Jim spiral more, as well as showed us more of Jim's character, but also the attempt to both sides the conflict between Jimmy and Anya in regard to the sexual assault, notably refusing any action from Anya. Curly isn't a saint and clearly shows kinship to Jim, but this doesn't disregard his leadership qualities. So what did we learn from this relationship? Jim is jealous of Curly. Curly is a sort of mentor to Jim. Jim is the negative perspective and Curly is the positive perspective. And lastly, that Curly could have done better to stop Jim. Now, how do Daisuke and Swansea's relationship relate to Jimmy's and Curly? Simply put, their dynamics are flipped. Swansea plays the role of a more negative mentor to Daisuke, while Curly is a sort of role model to Jimmy, built out of Jimmy's jealousy. Another key similarity between the two is that Swansea also doesn't feel content with the life that he's built or what he's become. He states this heavily during his final scene where he recounts his life before his death. Analyzing Swansea only shows us half of this dynamic. To understand his dynamic with Daisuke, you need to understand how Daisuke and Jimmy relate. Daisuke is the fresh-faced new guy that Jimmy likely was at one point. However, he lives life with a far better outlook than Jimmy. Even though people try to put him down, people like Swansea being a negative mentor, or even his parents stating that he's lazy, he still tries and he still cares. He always keeps an extremely positive outlook, always trying even though he may not be the smartest or the quickest to learn. When Swansea puts Daisuke out of his misery, he states that he could learn something for him, that he is a good working kid, and it just shows the parallels. The adults in Mouthwashing choose to be miserable in response to hardships they face, and Daisuke simply refuses. Now, what have we learned about this relationship? We've learned that Daisuke is the positive perspective and Swansea is the negative. We've learned that Swansea is the one who guides and Daisuke is the one who is guided. And Swansea, in a sense, is jealous of Daisuke, that if he was given more time with him, he would probably try and develop a positive outlook like him. And now we know, both relationships are shown to have a negative person and a positive person. Each has a mentor and a student. Each has someone who guides and one who is guided, and this is how the relationships mirror one another. So what's the point? The theme of Mouthwashing relates to how your upbringing doesn't define what you become in any way. Jim is given a lot of opportunities to better his life, but his jealousy and selfishness leads him down a path of stagnation and despair. Daisuke, even though being told by his family that he was lazy and even getting a somewhat negative mentor, is still able to keep his head on straight and be a good person. Daisuke chooses to be more. Mentors don't make the student, they just help guide. It's your core actions and internal beliefs that make you who you are. Anya's role in this analysis is small, but importantly defines who Jimmy and Curly are. Everyone on the ship treats Anya like garbage. Everyone but Curly and Daisuke. Upon hearing about Anya's pregnancy, Curly and Jimmy react very differently, but both flawed in their own ways. Curly, still believing that things could be worked out between the two of them by talking, seeing both parties as equal in a way, but his logic doesn't match his actions. Curly shuts down Anya's attempt to take action against her abuser. Jimmy, several times, however, he nobly chooses not to really reprimand Jimmy. Jimmy's effect on Anya is clear as day. She can't even speak to Jimmy normally, and in a scene shown a few days before the crash, she tries to kill herself. Although Curly's actions may be fitting to the diplomatic role of a captain, it cannot be denied that Curly fails Anya in this moment. Jimmy's reaction to her pregnancy differs down to the very core of who Jimmy is. He is scared of the consequences of his actions, but seemingly not very regretful of them. Instead of facing the truth of what he did to Anya and the closure of Pony Express, he chooses the extreme option to crash the ship and erase it all. In a cruel twist of fate, however, Curly sacrifices himself to save Jimmy regardless, and Curly is the only one grievously injured from the crash. In the months after the crash, it's difficult to imagine who is suffering more. Jimmy, having to live on as leader of a crew he meant to destroy and all the consequences of his mistakes, or Curly, who, if given a little less leniency to Jimmy, could have stopped all of this from happening. The game states that our worst moments don't depict who we are, but it's not as simple as that. We choose whether or not our worst moments depict who we are. It doesn't simply just happen. Hey guys, C Oob here. If you liked the video, please feel free to drop a like and or subscribe. If you didn't, maybe you should rewatch it to get my view times up because clearly you didn't watch the video. I'm really trying to take this YouTube stuff seriously and I think it's going great. So expect more videos from me. And as always, love y'all. Goodbye.